O- Okay, so it says recording in progress, so we'll jump right into it. So the agenda, like I said, we'll kind of do like this introduction welcome. We'll get into, the details of MiHIN, Making Choices Michigan. Lisa's going to do a great presentation. And then we'll collaborate on some plans that we have for next year. And then, like I said, we'll have like a roundtable discussion. We had a question proposed about different training options and stuff. So I'm hoping to have a conversation about that. But if anything pops up, during the presentation, feel free to just drop a questions in the chat. We'll, go through those and everything as we're going through the presentation and everything. So Lisa, you want to take it away?
Sure. So do you want to advance to the next slide?
Yeah.
Welcome and thank you guys for being willing to join. I'm kind of the relative newcomer to this little party. My name is Lisa Nicolau, and I'm the official title of Cross-Sector Data Sharing Program Director. And the reason I am now kind of there is with Jim Kraft's departure from MiHIN, that work now fell underneath our program. So it includes our work on honoring choices, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that means, as well as the idea of Making Choices Michigan and the work that was involved in Making Choices Michigan. But I'm only, one piece of a bigger team. You've had the ability to meet a couple of others. Monica, do you want to just kind of give, just reiterate who you are and your role here?
Yeah, so my name is Monica. I'm the Making Choices Michigan program manager. I'm pretty sure I've met most of you before, so and communicated with most of you before, so still here hanging out. So
and then we also have Lauren Phelan. Lauren, are you on the line?
I am. Hi, everyone. I am Lauren Phelan. I am a project manager at MiHIN and oversee our Honoring Choices program project, whatever you want to call it. And that does include advanced care planning as well as electronic consent management. So I don't think I've been on these calls before, so nice to meet you all.
Thanks, Lauren. And then we have Van Lee. He's my technical guru and keeps me from making a fool of myself most days. So.
You want to put it that way? No, it's a pleasure to be here. Hi, my name is Van Lee, as Lisa mentioned. I'm technically the product marketing manager overseeing those solutions that Lisa had mentioned. Pleasure being here, and I see some familiar faces, so I'm glad to see you all again.
Very cool. If you want to move on to the next slide. So again, I'm program director, but we have a very, very talented team. So I never understand kind of, and I want to make a level set, in the Making Choices Michigan world and the advanced care planning world, it's not necessarily, if you can go back to the previous one, there we go. Okay, making MiHIN. We want to level set a little bit on who MiHIN is. MiHIN is a health information exchange, health information network. We are the state designated health information network, and we are it's a nonprofit organization. We provide not just the technology to be able to move data throughout a healthcare, and by healthcare I mean a broader look at what is involved in healthcare and making people healthy and well. We want to be able to move that data to where it is needed, when it is needed for the care of individuals. So that includes not just the technology, but the services to connect those stakeholders in those broader regions to access the information. We are not a producer of healthcare data. We are not competing in a marketplace within Michigan. We are an unbiased, trusted data movement technology company, but that technology is only one piece of it. And we want to be really clear. Technology is not a solution in itself, but it has to be supported and driven by the humans that provide the care in order to make the best use of those resources. Next slide. And when we look at health information exchange was really intended to serve a purpose. And I'm a really old nurse. I used to work with paper charts. I remember orders dropping out of charts. I remember having to take, a 2-inch thick binder up everywhere I went and look through things. So the goals of health information exchange were really to reduce inefficiencies. We wanted to improve access to healthcare, lower the cost of healthcare, improve the outcomes. All of that triple aim or quadruple aim in healthcare has to be driven through data in order to really impact the care of individuals. And I say that because those are the goals that across the nation we set out with for health information exchange. Next slide. Cross-sector data sharing. So cross-sector data sharing is a true mouthful. And when we first started out a little over a year ago, we were called the social determinants of health team. We're like, wait a minute, we're not solving social determinants of health. Everybody's seen some variation of this slide. And I think those of us who have practiced within healthcare for a long period of time, we know the limitations that medical care has on people's ability to be healthy and well. Healthcare in medical care specifically plays about 20% of our overall, contributes 20% to our overall health outcomes. The other factors are health behaviors, the physical environments that we live in, those socioeconomic factors really contribute to people's ability to live healthy and well. And when we start to look at that, just do one more click for me, we start to realize that there's a lot of different sectors that contribute to that total picture of an individual. We want to be able to bring that data in, move that data out to make sure that people in those different sectors of care can contribute to the wider look of an individual, as well as receive information that affects their ability to care for that individual. And then how do we do that? Next click. Is we use the infrastructure that has already existed. We don't want to replicate infrastructure in all of these different sectors of care to move data. Using that infrastructure the state has already invested in really helps us get to reduce duplication and lowering costs, because we're utilizing tools and utilizing pathways that already exist. Next slide. You're going to hear the idea of a use case, and I don't know, again, some of you will be wildly familiar with this, so if you are, just kind of bear with me. But for those of you who are not, a use case is really just examples, one or more scenarios to be able to share specific types of information. And each use case identifies what's the purpose of sharing this information. If there's no purpose for sharing information, why are we sharing it? We want to know specifically what information is meant to be shared, what data is meant to be exchanged. And then it describes how those that data will be utilized by the people in the systems that receive that data. So when you hear of a use case, just think of different examples of how we share data. And you're going to hear that again come up. So keep that in the back of your head. Next slide. We're going to turn our attention back to something that I'm probably less familiar with and you're probably a lot more familiar with, which is the value of advanced care planning, both process and documents. We've been on this advanced care planning journey for what, 15, 20 years now? And the idea is really to be able to empower individuals to self-determine, to understand what their choices are, be able to make sure that they have the ability to document those choices, be able to share those choices with care teams, and have their treatment tailored to their choices. So it empowers individuals. Ultimately, some of the goals were to reduce the risk of unwanted patient care at the end of life, to increase health outcomes and increase patient satisfaction, as well as reduce the unnecessary healthcare spend. So again, this journey has been ongoing for 15 plus years now. Next slide. You heard Lauren, I think, talk about the idea of honoring choices. And I just want to take a moment to kind of clear up a couple of pieces, because there's two streams of work that are happening within MiHIN. One is this idea of honoring choices work, which is kind of design, develop, leverage, and deploy a way for patient choices to be made available through that statewide health information technology infrastructure. And the choices that we're talking about really relate to electronic consent, capture and distribution, as well as advanced care planning, document storage, query, and retrieval. That work, along with a new bucket of work in stakeholder engagement, is that kind of forms our Honoring Choices project work for 2023. We're going to go a little bit, one layer deeper into each one of those. Next slide. So advanced care document use case is really about that ability to store those documents, query them, retrieve them, and display them, provide access to those advanced care planning documents, whether we're talking about advanced directives, durable powers of attorney, MyPost, the full thread of documents that help to involved in advanced care planning. Making sure that those can be displayed at the point of care where they can be impacted and where it allows patients to self-determine, even if they're not able to speak for themselves. The use case is intended, like all of our use cases, to be vendor neutral and statewide. We'll talk a little bit more about this idea of vendor neutral, because just because we don't want like one single storage space for these documents, because that implies that there is one and only one right way to be able to do this. There are multiple vendors out there that allow documents to be stored. When we say vendor neutral, it allows us to still be able to let organizations choose where they want to store those documents, but flow them throughout that ecosystem. Next slide. Lauren and Van both talked a little bit about electronic consent management, and I mentioned it. Electronic consent management is really being able to capture consent electronically, be able to share that with the appropriate individuals so that we're not constantly having to understand where that consent is captured and how we can capture that again. There's a way to be able to do that. Again, vendor neutral. There's multiple different vendors out there that allow electronic consent to be captured, but we want to be able to allow organizations to utilize whatever vendor they want, but still be able to capture it and exchange throughout the ecosystem. How this relates to electronic consent capture, maybe within advanced care planning, is, you know, on the horizon and a potential for later on, but we need to understand how best to be able to do that. Next slide. And then there's this Making Choices Michigan work. Making Choices Michigan was really started with the Great Lakes Health Connect, HIE. And when MiHIN and Great Lakes merged back in 2020, the Making Choices Michigan work was adopted as a strategic business unit. The goals were really to promote conversations, advanced care planning conversations and process, both in healthcare and community, through leadership, training, and individual engagement. Again, coming back to those original goals of the advanced care planning movement of the last 15 to 20 years. Next slide. So this timeline, there's a lot of stuff on here, and I don't want to go into each one of it, but I think it's important to note, and certainly old nurse here, the environment that we're practicing in has dramatically changed in the last 5 years, not the least of which is COVID-19, both with an increased focus on and real life experience with, oh my gosh, what do we do when we can't have family members at the bedside telling us how to engage? And if we, you know, and we have these really critical situations. So there's an increased emphasis on this. We have a significantly reduced workforce, both in physician and nurses, and that is not likely to change. In fact, it's likely to get worse. We have an increased level of acuity of patients coming into the hospital systems now. So it's not a full impact, but certainly there's a lot of moving parts in here. And as we, as MiHIN, start to have had a leadership change, it presents a really good opportunity to do an environmental scan and figure out kind of what is the current state, both here in Michigan and nationally, and really make sure that we're driving towards the right solutions going forward. So that's where I really want to start driving towards that stakeholder engagement and understanding what we're looking to do in 2023, both for honoring choices work and the Making Choices Michigan work, that helps us set a cohesive strategy, not based on what we think, but based on our stakeholders who really need to help drive those decisions. Next slide. So that brings us up to the stakeholder engagement. We're part of the work, and it hasn't been done broadly in the last 3 to 5 years at least, but is to really develop a set of workshops late spring 2023. There's a lot of questions, and especially as I'm coming into this in a new capacity, in understanding kind of what the current state of literature is, what's the knowledge, what's the data show us about advanced care planning documentation, and what's the best use of those scarce resources. What are the goals of honoring choices at the end of life as it's impacted by the flow of data? How does data flow actually impact care teams? And what data is best to be able to move about the system? What's the best way to measure the success of honor? How we honor patient choices? Up until now, some of the data measurement is really about how many documents we store and how many documents we access. And I'm not sure. And I want to understand from stakeholders' perspective what they feel is the best way to be able to measure the success. So a lot of questions that we as a team have, and that we're hoping that our stakeholders can help us resolve and help create a strategy going forward that's cohesive. Next slide. So what's the ask? So right now, with the departure of Jim Kraft, we lost our training capacity. So while we're in a state of reformulating, we would ask that you support a pause in the work of Making Choices Michigan, while we use the time to be able to understand and gather stakeholder feedback to help us brainstorm and figure out what those next steps are. We want you as the experts in these fields to help us brainstorm about how to roll out these engagement sessions. Help us answer who should be at those stakeholder sessions, what we want to talk about, when we want to do it, where we want to do it, and make sure that we can translate why we're doing it. We would ask that you consider promoting the stakeholder engagement workshop sessions. You folks are leaders within this space, and remembering that this is not just solely for advanced care planning, but also within the capture of electronic consent. So those sessions may not be all driven towards one set of stakeholders. There might be certain sessions that have different stakeholders that are needed. And then we would also ask for some help to facilitate those stakeholder engagement sessions. Again, you folks are leaders in these fields. Next slide. So what we're kind of envisioning just in our own way of brainstorming is maybe 3 to 4 sessions lasting 1.5 to 2 hours with varying groups of people and varying topics over the course of that. And we're really looking at mid-March through the end of May as a potential timeline. And the goal is to be able to compile all of that information into a white paper that would be submitted to MDHHS, MiHIN board, and the HIT Commission for consideration in being able to drive that cohesive strategy. Next slide. This is just a timeline. I think we've talked about that. So go ahead to the next one. I think that's really the end. I didn't want this to be a let's stand up here and talk. I really want to be able to use this time best for understanding your thoughts, like what comments, what thoughts do you have about what you've heard in terms of the direction that we're looking to take. And I would just say, let's open it up to comments and thoughts. And I would say just unmute yourself and jump in. And Monica, if you're monitoring the chat function, I am not.
Yeah, and I'm gonna
Hey-
go ahead and stop sharing my screen too, just so that we can kind of have
Great.
like more face to face, quote
I
unquote.
appreciate that.
Hey, Lisa, Andy Holcreeve. I one, appreciate the opportunity to get sort of an update on things. Wasn't sure kind of where things were, so this was very helpful. And it'd be great to get a copy of the slide deck afterwards, just to be able to go back and look through it at my pace. I'm kind of curious though, when you were talking about making choices, Michigan, and sort of putting pause on that. Can you talk a little bit more about that and sort of maybe what you're looking, what drove it to a pause, and maybe what you're looking to accomplish through the pause?
Sure. So, Jim Kraft is, I don't have the level of training that he has. Making Choices Michigan is really formulated on respecting choices model. So it's a lot of the work that we were promoting, that we were doing, really involved training. I do not have that capacity. No one internal to MiHIN has that capacity. And as we're starting to kind of look at this, it's trying to understand the role that a health information technology company, a health information exchange, what role can and should we be playing versus others within this space that already do this work? Like, what is the right balance for a health and the right direction for a health information technology company and a health information exchange to take and play within Michigan?
That makes sense. And if I'm hearing you correctly too, when you talk about other actual systems that are doing and having these conversations and getting these documents completed, you're wondering if it's a duplicative or just kind of, kind of narrowing the niche for a health information technology company.
For sure. And, and again, I mean, Great Lakes Health Connect had, some really strong suits. They were driven by different motivators, and they operated. And when they adopted this work, this was like much earlier in the advanced care planning process. And Respecting Choices came out guns blazing, and we're kind of really driven down that pathway. But MiHIN's approach to pretty much everything that we do is vendor neutral, and this is very proprietary based. So again, trying to find that right balance for us and within this community.
So this is Rena Reilly from Corewell Health. Lisa, I just want to make sure that I'm processing this correctly so that I know how to figure out what our role would be in these stakeholder meetings.
Sure.
So MiHIN is really focusing on that they are a technology platform to help all of us as people that are interacting with people in our communities to help us work and how MiHIN can help our work and move us forward collectively.
The only correction to that I would add, and it's probably just more of a verbiage thing, is we're not really a platform, it's an information exchange. Platforms really kind of imply user interface. While we do have some minimal user interfaces that we do offer almost as safety nets, we want data and information to be able to move across that environment into systems that are appropriate for those organizations. So not dictating, use our system, but still we have systems available if you want them, but you have your own ability to determine what systems you want to work in and be able to still have access to the right information from across the environment.
And then a follow-up question, Lisa, do you guys have any strategic goals? Just because I'm just thinking timeline, right? Strategic planning is well underway for Corewell Health for 2023. So just trying to think on those timelines and how to align that up and really build a great partnership and how to, right? Because I think what I hear you saying is you want us to be aligned so that we're certain we can all win together.
Yeah.
And so kind of figuring out timelines and that kind of, are there goals for 2023? Because I think that's where where I personally have struggled with some of our calls in the past, is it hasn't felt like there's alignment around what we're trying to accomplish or the goals that we're working on. So then I'm left in a position of, I can stay focused on my goals for Corewell, or I can spend less attention on my goals of Corewell and work on the goals in partnership around the state collaborative or MiHIN.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, timelines, I certainly for the work of some of the honoring choices, so that electronic consent management, we have pilots going on within that space to be able to continue to develop the technology that allows consent to be captured and shared. That's right now going on in substance use disorder, specially protected information, and something else, man. What's the third? Substance use disorder, specially protected information. Behavioral. There we go.
Yeah, and 80, yep, you got it.
So electronic consent capture, but how could that be applied, or should that be applied to advanced care planning, or maybe the capture of decision makers? I'm not really sure. Then the work of the advanced care document exchange, that's work that is already going on. What we want to understand is the current state of literature and data to make sure that before we get ready to kind of expand that work, we want to understand, and there's some data out there that suggests that advanced care planning is not meeting its goals. And we've got like 10 years worth of data on that. So how do we use the data to make informed choices about where to spend wisely in technology?
Yeah, absolutely.
Did that help? Or did
It
that
does.
make things worse?
Right? All resources are expensive, whether they're technology resources or human resources. And we
Exactly.
have to make sure that we're spending those dollars wise.
Yes.
That impacts how we're able to support our communities. So I get it.
And technology is one of those things that, I mean, it's almost infinitely possible to do all kinds of things, but just because we can doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing to do. And the people and the care teams have to drive, who have to use the technology, really should be driving the technology decisions. So, yes. So thank
I
you.
have
for that comment.
a couple of related questions
Sure.
having to do with the depositories, queries, and retrievals, since I work in a acute care hospital that uses this information, or attempts to various degrees, to find the documents that may be stored somewhere. I'm wondering if I'm taking it that being non-proprietary, that you're not focusing on a specific deposited database, but how are you drawing from those databases into the front lines when a hospital, ICU, or emergency department needs to find a document, and how do we train toward that finding of those documents? That's one question. I got another follow-up, but
Let me answer that first one, and I'm gonna take a stab at it, Van, but when I mess it up, you may have to come in and save me. So within all of the different data exchanges that we have going on, there are going to be different vendors, whether you're talking about advanced care documents that need to be exchanged, or whether you're talking about consent, or whether you're talking about lab values. Using something called an application programming interface quickly allows us to go out, be able to get that document that is stored in a different space, but still be able to move the data where it needs to go. Again, whether you're talking about lab values or whether you're talking about a document like an advanced care plan. Van, what did I not say correctly?
No, you nailed it. I think back to your point around using these dollars wisely and recognizing that in this space, repositories there are plenty, commercial ones that are HITRUST certified and whatnot. So focusing on what the ONC, Office of National Coordinator, has said around data standards and exchange. There are APIs, that API that Lisa had mentioned. So being able to focus on that allows us to be agnostic and focus more on the problems that we're solving versus which vendor and where they go, right? We know that there are many vendors. And so being able to connect them all with the standard is going to be key for us. Yeah, great job. Lisa,
Are you still thinking that this is a very state-based or regional effort with this MiHIN arm now? Or is it more regional outside of Michigan, or even pushing toward more national connections, or not?
I think that we can make it both regional, statewide, and national. I think the question becomes, we've had 15 years of being able to do this, and we've got data now in that quality improvement, continuous quality improvement effort that says, despite having invested a ton of money into developing solid process, into being pushing this through, getting reimbursements in place to make this a focus of care, that all of that over the last 15 years has not moved those goals of care. So and again, I'm just seeing hints of that. I want to understand what the professionals who do this for a living see at a national level in terms of the data. The purpose of data is both for care coordination, but also to be able to use that data to make wise decisions later on. It's for that continuous quality improvement project. So we always want to reflect on what the data is showing us.
One more last question for now. When you use the word honoring choices, is this a synonymous term with the statewide honoring choices program, or this is a different form of honoring choices? And I was going to ask Rose about that and ask others what you meant when you have the slides that say honoring choices.
Yeah, there's some like unfortunate wording that I did not create, our team did not create. Honoring choices seems to have a lot of broad applications. If you think about honoring choices as project work, not specific to anything outside of Michigan or MiHIN, but it's really just project work that allows the data to honor patient choices.
So you mean not an organization, but not a strategic effort, but a overall value.
Yes.
Of honoring. Okay.
Yes. So, yes, I'm sorry. Other questions, comments? I'm seeing some chats. If there are things, I would love to hear you. Just pop into the conversation. I'm a conversation girl.
Blowing up the chat. It is me. I've been blowing it up, just trying to offer, context and, just engaging here.
Joanne, would you like to introduce yourself?
I would. My name is Joanne Jarvie. I am the Senior Director of Outreach and Market Communications. While I have not been able to work with your group yet, I'm excited. I usually lead specific parts of stakeholder engagement, making sure that the right people are in the room, making sure that we have everybody who we need to have, getting in newsletters, getting into departments, making sure we have the technical, clinical, and business people all making decisions. So I'm like the party planner, and then I nudge people to come to the party, and then I open the party, and then other people do the work. So I've got the best job. But I was in the chat just trying to put in some more information and to give some more color to what Lisa was leading.
And there is a question, there is a question in the chat. Amy Bailey Sheets had posted, I see goals of care discussions and discussions about choosing who to designate as your patient advocate as two very separate discussions. And Rita responded to that as well. And I think, Diane, did you have a question? Because I saw you perk up. Okay, sorry. Amy, did you want to, or I think Stephanie had their hand up too, actually. I'm sorry. So
great. Jump into the party here. We like comments, and we like thoughts, and we like discussion.
Yeah, this is Rob from Henry Ford Health. Just to chime in, I agree that we need to really come to terms around what we mean about advanced directives. I mean, we have legislative documents that are baked into our legislation. And I think that's probably the only standard place we could start. So that would be the durable power of attorney for healthcare. And hopefully at some point, whenever the state figures out my post, but I think you use a loose term like advanced directive, and you're going to get a very wide interpretation of what that is and how that's implemented. And I'm actually just trying to level set myself here. So we're talking about sharing these documents through MiHIN so other healthcare systems can see them. Like I'm trying to really break it down to the grassroots of what you're trying to say here.
So that is kind of like the direction that we have been moving in, and that has been at the direction of the HIT Commission. What I'm saying is new information is coming on. We have a new environment post-COVID. We have a lot of changes that have come in, and we have new data from which to say, let's stop, let's pause, let's re-strategize and make sure we're moving in the right direction. Because is movement of documents the right thing to be doing and investing in? I'm not saying it is or it isn't. I'm saying it's a question that needs to be answered by stakeholders and end users who would be utilizing that to care for individuals. I look like I've confused you, Rob.
Yeah, big time, but that's fine. I can
Well,
stay.
no, let's talk through it, because
I'll go on mute.
Let's dig in here.
Yeah, let's dig in, because if you're confused, 6 other people are confused as well. Let's walk through it.
Right. So MiHIN is able to share protected health information, right, under HIPAA. And so we move through a trust framework. So if a person goes to the hospital or is discharged from the hospital, that information is sent through MiHIN from that hospital to any of the entities that have an active care relationship with that client. Michigan is an opt-out state. Data is flowing. And when data is flowing cross-sector, cross-system, cross-EHR, from skilled nursing to hospital, from hospital to behavioral health, from behavioral health to schools, it is moving through and using the algorithms that MiHIN has created to do that legally, technically, and privately. So if at any one point somebody comes in and says, who has my information been shared with and how and when? Our nonprofit system, not wholly owned by the government, not wholly owned by payers, not wholly owned by providers or hospitals, but meant for the public good, can peel back the layers and be as transparent as possible. So yes, originally, the reason why MiHIN or Great Lakes Health Connect felt strongly and continues to feel strongly, I think, about advanced care planning is because we're trying to make it so that the person is in the middle and making the decisions and about their health care, so that we are creating care teams around the patient. We are creating patient-centric algorithms to move data. But I think what we're learning is that just because a document shows up somewhere in some system because somebody moved it, it's not being used for specific outcomes.
So Rob, explain to me your role and kind of like how you got into this group, and what are the most confusing points for you about kind of the direction?
So I'm very familiar with MiHIN and the historical data that's exchanged. I'm a director of care coordination. I have responsibilities in a multitude of spaces, including advanced care planning.
Great.
And what I'm struggling with in terms of this as a concept is we have such internal struggles on getting validated, completed durable powers of attorney healthcare documents in our own internal record I am struggling making the leap in terms of how do I share that in a way that is going to be useful to other practitioners as part of the network, because that's something we've struggled with historically as well around MiHIN is we get a lot of data, but how do we get that data into frontline clinicians' hands for it to make a difference?
Yes.
So I have a problem right now with providers understanding I have an advanced care planning document inside of Epic that's documented as complete. So I'm struggling with that. So for me to extrapolate this and try to think, how can I share that ACP document with Renee, because we have a shared patient, and how they could get it into that frontline staff. I'm not that far operationally because I have so many intrinsic barriers in this space. So
Well,
just,
and I think, Rob, that whole summation really helps to lay out some of those barriers that we've talked about. And when we couple those barriers, just kind of getting a document to a provider within your own environment to have that impact care outcomes and the individual's treatment at the point of care, what we are starting to see in that national data is that even when those care documents are in place, some literature suggests that even when those documents are in place, the decisions that they make in here, they are a guide. They are a guide to be able to have a conversation at the point of care that sometimes people's choices earlier in life don't follow through, and they make very, very different choices during kind of critical care events that have nothing to do with their overall choices, that you can't extrapolate without context to put something in paper and have it be impactful at a point of care in a critical conversation. So the question then becomes is not should we move documents, but what is the value of the document creation?
Lisa, this is Rose.
Hey, Rose.
I think during some earlier meetings, Jim had mentioned AD Vault as being where the advanced directives are going. So I'm somewhat confused.
Sure.
Like, are we uploading into MiHIN? Are you then passing them to AD Vault? Like, what is the flow of the documents that do get uploaded, which a lot of the sites that I work with across the state have stopped uploading with the changes that have occurred. So now we have them in one health system or an office, and they're not accessible beyond that. And that was the whole purpose to the HIN uploading of the ADs, so that they would be known. We're a very transient population. So having them known past one health system or one physician office is really the goal.
Sure. So AD Vault is a vendor. Okay.
Right.
You have to start somewhere. So we started with one vendor. Can we do this with one vendor? Once we can do this with, sorry, I apologize. Oh, shoot. Once we do this with one vendor, we can do this with multiple vendors and be able to pull that in, because Henry Ford may choose one vendor and Spectrum may choose another vendor. So it shouldn't matter which vendor you utilize. It should be able to flow. Again, though, I want to come back to the idea of national level quality improvement data to say not how we're going to do it, but should this be a focus for our health information exchange dollars? As a state, to invest, is this the wisest use of resources? And I have my own thoughts, but I need to our opinion doesn't matter. It's our stakeholders and the clinicians who utilize this data. Does this impact the care that they provide?
So Lisa, I still am not real sure where the documents are going. So if somebody wants to upload into MiHIN, where are they housed?
Family, I'm going to haul you in.
Yeah, sure.
Where's my technical guy?
So again, we needed to replace PCD. So our vendor is AD Vault. So it's going into AD Vault.
Okay, that's what I had understood from prior meetings, and that's why I'm just trying to figure out what are we really doing here, and then if they can use different vendors,
Yep.
My concern again is that then healthcare people are not going to look in 50 places to find a document. Like
Absolutely.
when they're busy and they're working and their time is short, they're short staffed, things need to be accessed in a timely manner. They're not going to go to a lot of different, health information networks to try to find these documents. So I understand the neutral thing you're trying to do here. I get that. But I also feel like at a state level to begin with, it would be nice if we could get them into one spot where providers could go and access those documents.
And Rose, and to be frank, our providers won't leave the EHR. So it
Yeah,
needs to be
exactly. I hear that.
completely embedded into the EHR. I mean, obviously we route outside of Epic. It looks like it's inside of Epic. So to answer your question, Lisa, is this a valuable space? And you relate things like quality improvement. And I think that quality improvement work you talk about, admission, discharge transfers, medication reconciliations, you're dealing with a lot of ones and zeros, I'll call it. Either patients on a medication or not on a medication. When you get into this advanced care planning space, you land in this incredibly gray area.
Yes.
And the chat box is littered with that, and there's a variety of interpretations. So when it comes down to what I think of a data exchange, what I think is clearly focused on ones and zeros, advanced care planning has so much gray space. I don't know if it fits the same sort of project and works that's been led through these sort of data exchanges in the past. Even among the leaders here, we have different interpretations and different ways our health systems view specific documents and interpret those documents. So from this quick meeting, at least my recommendation, based on, I know the barriers I'm fighting internally, let alone to start trying to get my providers to look externally for documents in this space, would be for MiHIN to focus on something that's more ones and zeros.
And again, that is why we are going out to the stakeholders to really understand from a national data perspective. And the whole country went down this pathway. This is not a Michigan specific issue. The whole country is struggling with this exact same thing. We have invested heavily because it made sense, right? It made sense. If we could just talk to people about this and relay the complexity of decision making at the end of life, we would make good quality decisions at the end of life, and we would impact care, we would impact costs, we would impact outcomes. But despite the investment, that has not proven true. And we have to eventually use that data to make good decisions. So I'm sorry.
I'd like to say a little something if it's okay. This is
Diane,
Stephanie
how about
Vince. So one of the things that hey, Lisa, I think you hit the nail on the head, at least from my perspective, is what you said early on, is the empowerment piece. Because what we have to remember is that these are patient-owned documents. It's a service that we provide, and certainly there is, you could argue, some value in having these documents uploaded, but it's not our responsibility to manage these documents for patients. We need to empower them to understand the importance of having the conversation. And to Rob's point, the documents can only do so much. And so I can certainly appreciate the importance of having a document when we need it. But at the end of the day, it's that conversation that I feel is often missing, even if we have a document, where I feel the monies could be more, there could be more investment in that arena versus just document sharing, if you will. The documents themselves, they have a very limited capacity of what they can and can't do.
Yes.
So this is Martha York from Region 2 Area Agency on Aging. And as a community-based organization that does advanced care planning with the My Choice waiver participants, for example, we have a nice relationship with MiHIN. You give us the hospital discharge and admission information. We've got something going that really has helped us to coordinate care. And a lot of times we're the ones having those conversations that Stephanie was just talking about. We're the ones helping them create the documents, but to get the documents into the hands of the medical professionals and upload it into the system that the doctor is actually going to find them. And all of that is very hard coming at it from the other end. Like a lot of you are in the health system, but I'm outside of the health system and I can't seem to get a way in. So if there's any, I mean, I don't know. So would we be uploading this as a partner with MiHIN?
Again,
And would their doctor be able to see it, but they'd have to leave their system to go see it, right?
I really think that before we start talking about how that should happen, we have to go back and look at data and say, what is the value of advanced care planning? The process, the conversation, and the documents, and what of that is right to move and store. These documents, and again, I'm an ICU nurse, okay, from way back, ER, way back. Documents like these are intended to change over the course of time. When we have something that is put in place at a certain point in time and that patient's condition changes, that document is intended to change with that human being, with their condition, with their prognosis. When we get into storing documents, we get into version control problems on top of this. Now you impact this at a MyPost level when those documents are intended to change as much as by a weekly basis. They are typically written in pencil, for gosh sakes, for that very reason. So what is the value in storing and sharing those documents? We can do it. At what cost and what opportunity cost does it do? And does the value, is the value there to apply?
Lisa, it maybe a subtle tweak, and you may prefer to have a close-ended question by asking should, but maybe the question is really why. Why
Yes.
would you do this? And I think then it is a return on investment kind of a piece.
Yes.
But I've got to jump, but I really have appreciated being a part of this conversation, really from an outsider's perspective. I've been involved with MiHIN and Great Lakes Health Connect and doing advanced care planning. I'm very passionate about it, but I hear everything that everybody's saying in terms of, at the end of the day, I mean, the advanced care planning document, all it does legally is appoint somebody to speak for you when you can't speak for yourself. And so that's part of the measurement in terms of why you would do something like this, in terms of where those dollars go. I still believe in the conversation. I still think it's something that we need to be promoting and empowering, almost on a consumerism basis, right? To teach and train patients how to advocate for themselves, because if you expect the system to advocate for you, you're in trouble.
Yes.
So that's my 2 cents. I want to stay involved. I appreciate everybody being on the call, and I look forward to follow up and being involved going forward.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
All right, we are at time, but I see one more hand. I don't want to eliminate people from talking. Rena.
So my question is, so I think the purpose of this call is to identify participation for these groups that are looking to take place March and on. And so I just want to make sure that I have a clear understanding of what these groups are going to be talking about and giving stakeholder analysis on. Are the groups going to be trying to answer that question of what is advanced care planning and what value does it bring? Or are you looking for stakeholders to bring, this is what our organization has defined as advanced care planning, what value we put on it, this is what we're trying to accomplish, how can MiHIN help us and help our community members? Because I feel like those are two very different topics, and I would put very different people in the room for them.
I think that we have to flush that out a little bit further, and maybe that there could be a smaller working group of this group to see if we can utilize your knowledge to help formulate the right sessions, the right questions, because 3 to 4 sessions allows us to kind of get at multiple different topics. Because again, this is also about our electronic consent management. And is there a role to be able to capture very discrete pieces of information about advanced care planning or what have you through electronic consent? We don't know exactly, but man, I would like to pick all of your brains if you're willing to join a smaller work group to help facilitate and to help develop those sessions. Diane.
Hey, thanks for the meeting. I appreciate it. I do have to bounce as well, but I'm wondering, will there be HIT Commission members on the stakeholder
Yes.
meeting?
Yes.
Awesome. If you would like help formulating the discussion, I'm happy to help as well.
That's fabulous. Anybody
Great to
else
see
will send out a summary email along with the slides and ask for people to email us if you would like to participate in a smaller work group. Thank you so much for joining and for your active engagement. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you. Take care.